The story is crazy. One of the founder went to an event more than a year ago where Drew was a speaker. And at the end of the panel, he went to Drew and they just chatted. And for some reason in the conversation, Drew was like, "Oh, you should build that startup. I'll Venmo you $200 to buy the domain name." So he gets $200 from Drew Houston in his Venmo account to buy a domain name. Okay, and that's it. They pivot a few times, and this is what ends up becoming Sorce. And so he then, a few weeks before YC, Venmos to Drew Houston $1,000 to get noticed. And in the Venmo description, he puts a small pitch. He was like, "Hey, we met last year. I pivoted and we're doing this revenue and we have that many users. Are you interested?" And Drew Venmoed back $200,000. Most founders don't think twice about the address they list when they incorporate, until they realize it's actually their home address that's showing up on public records. Stable fixes that. It gives you a real business address you can use everywhere: incorporation, IRS, banks, vendors. It keeps your personal information private and helps your business look professional from day one. Every piece of mail that comes into that address, Stable digitizes with an AI summary that tells you exactly what each item is and what needs your attention, all from one secure dashboard. So from your first piece of mail to fully automated workflows, Stable grows with your business. To sign up for virtual address, head over to usestable.com/pod, P-O-D, to get 50% off on your first 3 months. That's usestable.com/pod, P-O-D. Thank you, Stable, for sponsoring today's episode. Now back to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lobster Talks, the #1 podcast about YC startups. Today, we are preparing a Fall 25 Demo Day that's happening December 3rd in San Francisco. And I'm here with Laurie, and we're going to rank some of the startups. Well, we're not going to rank. We're going to tell your favorite startups of the batch. We're going to talk through them and present them to you if you don't know them and talk about why we like them. So, Laurie, thank you for being here. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, cool. It's good to be back. It's going to be a little bit different. I think what we're usually doing before is doing things in hindsight. So talking about like who was most exciting at Demo Day or who most investors were talking about. This is perhaps where we can look back in a couple of weeks and see what we're thinking. So yeah, there's 150 companies. We're going to look through 5 categories. So B2B, consumer, fintech, healthcare, industrial, and real estate, which are going to be grouped together. So yeah, let's kick off.
Let's dive in. So absolutely, we do things differently. We're trying this. Let us know in the comments if you like this format or not. And of course, we'll be back, Laurie and I, for a special Demo Day debrief right after Demo Day. I think we're recording probably just the day after Demo Day to really get you all the fresh and crusty information. So of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel or on your favorite podcast platform to make sure you catch the episode. Will be published just a few days after Demo Day. All right, let's start with the biggest category because it had, I think, 60% of the batch total startups, which is B2B. And Laurie, why don't you tell us your first peek in B2B?
Yeah, cool. So I immediately was keen to kind of differentiate from a lot that are quite similar. There's a lot in there that's about things with AI agents, doing work agentically, which are interesting, but I think didn't necessarily appeal to me. I'm looking really in this for products that I think I could see myself using or testing out. And I didn't actually get a chance to test this one today, but I'm really interested in, and it is a Waffer, which is Waffer. It's basically video animations. And so the thing that I think is really kind of interesting about this is that, yes, there's a lot of video tools that are AI based. So things like, Sora or even the Google products are really good. What they don't really have solved for is the element of editing those, or they often feel quite untamable. And that's the same like when you're creating photos or images in Nano Banana or whatever. Like you get 80% of the way there, and then you try to prompt it to do that last 20%, and you totally lose all of the stuff that you liked about the original image. And their core innovation, or seemingly through the demos, is that you can like iteratively refine specific things or specific scenes with text commands. So for example, like zoom in at this point, like at 1.5 seconds, do this zoom, and it's making precise edits, and that's kind of, I think, the real gap between someone who's not able to do something and then someone who's kind of able to do it with AI, without it being really obvious that it's kind of AI generated. Because I think when you see a lot of content that people are pushing out that's AI generated, they probably aren't 100% pleased with it or stoked with it, but it's better than nothing, so they do it. I think like this middle layer of control, I think, is going to be important. And I think it's interesting in terms of then the bull case around it as a startup. It is in danger, I think, of being like a feature rather than a product on its own. Like, is this something that Canva would just come in and do, or perhaps even Adobe After Effects? But I think there is room in the market specifically for this, because I don't think Canva is going to mess too much with animation, just because it's like a big can of worms for them to open. And Adobe After Effects is baked into like Adobe's pricing and software packages, which are kind of pretty inaccessible to most people. So like the base price, or they have a free tier of 40 credits, and then they have a base pricing of like $9. So it's pretty accessible. I think it can hit that Canva market, which is maybe like mom and pop kind of businesses, or smaller companies that don't really want to contract someone out with their heavy load skill set like Adobe.
Yeah, it's a very interesting trend we've seen in YC. First of all, YC has been very heavy in the video space recently, so that's a great call on your part. And there was a similar tool in the previous batch that was called Hera, Hera. Also sort of doing a similar approach of retail pricing for After Effects with AI. And I think they sort of also had this thing where you could have a first prompt and then try to change it again and again. But this one, Waffer, seems to be going one step further. That's quite an interesting thing as well. We've seen more and more in YC of those companies trying to solve this specific problem of, hey, once you prompt it, it's done. Either you start from scratch and you have to one-shot everything, or you can really change it. And so we've seen more and more and more companies. In this batch, there's also a company doing this for long-form content creation, including movies. And this one is called Koyol. We didn't plan on talk about it today, but I met with the founder, and it is very interesting. They have 120-minute movies made with their tool, because you can just come in and change just a single scene, or not even change the entire scene, but be like, hey, change where it's taking place, or change the camera angle, or whatever it is on that specific. So we've seen more and more of that, of those solutions. Lots of players, and probably just a very few number of winners in the end. But Waffer is for sure interesting, and especially for people like me, I notice them as well, because I create a lot of videos online. Obviously, this is what we're doing here, even though there's not a lot of After Effects in this podcast, but could be, and it was inaccessible before for someone like me. You had to go through a professional. Like, I don't know how to use After Effects. I could learn it for sure. Like, I know it's, potentially I can learn, but I just don't have the time. And with this, you just prompt and say, hey, give me an animation of this and this and that, and boom. So very cool choice. Waffer, check them out. I'll go with my B2B pick. And so this one is interesting because it's probably both B2B and B2C. So it is both a B2B and B2C play, but it was in the B2B section on the YC website. So it counts, and it's a startup that I've been pretty impressed with. It's Sorce, Sorce. It's Tinder for jobs. So basically, it's an app where you'll upload your resume and put the criteria of what types of job you're looking for, and then they'll show you a job that you can apply to. And if you swipe left, nothing happens. If you swipe right, there's an AI that's going to apply for you. So what's really cool is you can apply to 100 jobs in 10 minutes, and you just swipe, and then they'll do the work for you. And they've had amazing early traction. I think they have more than 500,000 users, 500,000 users already. They just gone completely viral online, mostly on TikTok. The team is incredible. Is three young dudes who just graduated. They're 21, 22, and 22 years old. So extremely young team, extremely hungry. But they're going after this huge market, and it hasn't really changed in a long time. Today, if you want to apply to a job, like you have to go to the website, you have to create an account. Usually they send you an email confirmation. You can't just upload your resume. You have to fill in this long form, and it's always a different format. So that's what they solved for with the AI. It's actually not that easy to build, but it's just such a 10x or probably 100x better experience for the user, because once you have your resume, the AI can do the rest. So experience is great. They went insanely viral, and I think for the right reason. It's so innately viral as a product. Lots of users. It's a big market with lots of money in it. Like people are paying a lot of money to get applicants to their jobs, etc. And I'll also tell a funny story about them. So they got Drew Houston, founder of Dropbox, to angel invest in them. The story is crazy. One of the founder went to an event more than a year ago where Drew was a speaker. And at the end of the panel, he went to Drew and they just chatted. And for some reason in the conversation, Drew was like, "Oh, you should build that startup. I'll Venmo you $200 to buy the domain name." So he gets $200 from Drew Houston in his Venmo account to buy a domain name. Okay, and that's it. They pivot a few times, and this is what ends up becoming Sorce. And so he then, a few weeks before YC, Venmos to Drew Houston $1,000 to get noticed. And in the Venmo description, he puts a small pitch. He was like, "Hey, we met last year. I pivoted and we're doing this revenue and we have that many users. Are you interested?" And Drew Venmoed back $200,000. He just Venmoed them the angel check. He was like, "Okay, here's 200,000." And so he's an angel investor in that company. I think the story is just so cool. It's just so amazing. So go to events, talk to people. You never know what happens. But yeah, a very interesting thing. Now you've presented the bear case, so I can present the bear case as well. It's a very young company with young founders. I guess the app is probably replicable by LinkedIn or Indeed or someone else. That's the case for almost every startup at YC. It could be replicated by a giant, and they almost never do. But it's still early days. But it's a very cool, interesting startup in my opinion. So that's my B2B pick.
I think where I have more of a bear case around them is less about them being copied by someone like LinkedIn. I don't think it feels native enough to how LinkedIn would do the applications. I actually think it's the alienating the user on the other side, because if you've ever been, like when I've hired people or when you hired people, you know how that process is, where you put out a job application and probably 80% to 90% of applicants to the job have absolutely no business applying to that job at all, and it's kind of a big waste of everyone's time. This is obviously trying to solve that from the consumer point of view, that the consumer isn't wasting time applying for jobs they won't get, but it is actually accelerating the problem on the business's side, and they are the people that you want to be protecting. So like, is there a scenario where actually as more and more applicants that are less relevant come into the market or come into these job cycles, are there actually ways that the target or the second order effects user, i.e. the businesses, do things to circumnavigate Sorce jobs actually having access to being able to apply there? Because if there are 1 million college graduates who are using Sorce jobs, and 75% of the time they're not relevant applications, are employers going to put things in place to kind of prevent those kind of applications applying? And now obviously I think that's probably a positive effect for society, because it will solve this problem of that over iterations. But I think as an interesting one for Sorce to navigate, I did see that one of the things they were doing to navigate that, which was interesting, and I tried this and I thought was really good from a user experience, was they prompt you with questions and you speak to it like you would with Claude or ChatGPT, and it was saying like, "Oh, describe this." It was almost like an interview, like describe a time in your career when you've done this, and then similar questions. And then from that, I guess they're trying to more heavily tailor the application that you do submit in the end. So maybe there's ways that they can prevent that from happening, but I think I'm cautious of that, just having been on the other side and being like, there is no reason this person should have sent
No,
me an application.
that's very very true. I agree with you. I'll say two things. One, I believe their idea is not to make you apply to anything, but to make you apply to jobs that you really are a fit for. Also, I want to say on a funny note that there's a lot of YC companies trying to solve for the other side. I've seen many YC companies be like, "Hey, if you're SpaceX or so." By the way, Sorce placed had people really hired at big companies like SpaceX and Tesla and Meta and whatever. Also regular jobs like Target, Walmart, Citibank. So it does work. But yeah, I've seen products be like, hey, you get 100,000 applicants if you're SpaceX, probably. Like that's way too many because everyone wants to work at SpaceX. How do you filter through and select the best? This is something where AI is really good. It's good at ingesting a lot of data and surfacing things that you prompted to. And so it might very well end up being AI applying and AI scanning through. That's the case for many things. Like if you think about it, many things in the world are going to be AI to AI. A lot of phone calls are going to be AI talking to AI. A lot of emails and support and stuff like that. But even like if you think of web traffic, like more and more websites are being built for agents. They're also being built by agents sometimes. So AI is going to be 95% of a lot of things, including internet traffic, including probably emails and communications, and probably including job application. The goal and the ideal in the end, hopefully, is that it is a better result for everyone, a better outcome in the real world. You find better jobs, it takes you less time, and then with the other applications on the other side, it takes also less time to the company to find a great applicant. All right, let's move on to our second category, which is consumer. So, Laurie, you go first. What's your favorite consumer startup of this batch?
Okay, cool. There were some really good ones to choose from this time, which is pretty exciting because I think consumer apps is definitely having a moment, and YC is getting some super talented founders with some really good ideas. The one that I am picking is SellRaze, and so SellRaze is basically like an AI powered assistant for selling anything. It connects to like eBay, Poshmark, Depop, Facebook Marketplace. And so when you're in your house, you basically just take a picture of an item and it will, using AI go and go, okay, well, this is a Nike shoe of this color, this size, etc. It can prompt you for more details. And then it goes and automatically lists those on all the marketplaces. Which is super cool because it saves loads of time. And actually, I've got here a little Pokemon game because I've been clearing out some stuff in my house, and I have tons of old Nintendo stuff. And I've actually over the last few weeks, I've made a decent amount of money selling this all on eBay. But I've had this horrible pain of like dealing with the eBay message system, listing all these things, like using ChatGPT to research like what price should I be doing things at. And I was so excited when we were doing the research for this to go and look at SellRaze. It's not currently available in the UK, but I went through the onboarding, did the processes to like list things. I just couldn't actually put them on the UK version of those sites. And it just is such an awesome problem to solve. I think there are kind of a few reasons why I think this is really interesting. The one is that I think the worst thing about dealing with it as a seller is really the communication that you have to have with people on the other side. So if you list something on Facebook, you might get a bunch of messages that say, oh, would you take $50 for this, $40 for this, $30 for this? It can handle that using AI, which is really nice. And then the last thing that is then seemingly going to do is that I think as they solve this problem more of having people having to list on Facebook, list on eBay, they will actually get scope creep themselves to start taking over as a marketplace. And so, obviously eBay and all other marketplaces begin with this like chicken and egg problem of buyers and sellers. But if they can get a real volume of sellers, it doesn't take too many degrees to go and get the buyers. That's where I think they can I think their early traction is something like they've sold 500,000 items on the platform. And I think, if they can turn that kind of seller distribution and unlock this buyer side of the market, I think they can go from helping you list on eBay to then just cutting out eBay entirely. And this is like an AI native version of eBay, which is obviously one of the biggest venture capital successes in history. So it's super interesting.
Yeah, I love that you picked them because they've been. Uh, I didn't pick them for this category because we all had to make choices, but they were a very strong contender. I've seen them, and I think what they're solving for is fantastic. It's this basic thing of this new technology, AI, making our life easier, and there's so many ways AI is making our life easier, doing work for us, and that's what it is. And so they cut it down to the bare essential. You just take a picture and you say, "Hey, sell this for me." And that's it. From what I've seen, their early traction has been impressive. I mean, 500,000 items sold. I think it's quite impressive in a couple months, and which means they probably have a ton more listed because you don't sell through everything, obviously. But very, very impressive as well. I agree. I didn't even think of it as the AI native eBay or the AI eBay killer, but I agree. Now that you've said it, it's probably what it is, and it's this amazing thing happening at YC because YC was very early to recognize it, where they said already 2 years ago, AI is going to rewrite the rules of business and no one is safe. Like you can build the AI Amazon, you can build the AI eBay, you can build the AI Google, you can build anything. By the way, the AI Google is probably OpenAI, I guess, for now. But like no one is safe. That's super interesting for us investors because you can rewrite the rules of everything and you can bet on the next giants and you can have companies taking the place of hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap and market value. So super awesome pick. I love it. I picked another one which is also using AI to do something new. And this app is called Sunflower. And so Sunflower is an app companion to help you stay sober or to help you with addiction. So it doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be, drugs. It could be behaviors like gambling or, whatever it is. I'm using it to try and quit sugar, which is proving very difficult in our world, but I'm trying to eat less sugar. Obviously, sugar is not really good for you. So it's just a consumer app that you can just download for free. There's a paid version, obviously, but you can just download it and you have, I think, a 7-day free trial. And it's using AI to chat with you, to encourage you, to be there for you when you think you're going to relapse, sending you reminders on prompts, etc. It's also a community where you can talk and again, when it's going well, you can share, but when it's a bad time, you can also share and get support. And they've just been exploding. They have, I believe, tens or hundreds of, probably tens of thousands of paid subscribers. And it's something that I really appreciate because it's both, a great business making money, but it's also very useful for the world and for society. Living now in San Francisco, drug is a problem that you encounter a lot. And what's beautiful is if you look at the users of Sunflower, what they say it really does matter. It really works. And so it's not perfect. It's not like, oh, you install the app and you're cured. But I believe the statistics is somewhere around either 75 or 80% of users said it prevented at least one relapse, which is already great. Like if you can just prevent one relapse, it's awesome. And that's just that's the for the majority of users, but some users, many, if you look at the comments and etc., said that it literally changed their lives. I believe there's a comment from a guy who says, I've been drinking for the past 20 years and I've never been able to quit. And now I just spent 3 months on the app and that's it. I'm not drinking anymore. It's like, wow, that's insane. So Kobe, the founder, is really special as well. Really someone very interesting. Already had previous success in business and really wants to do this to have a positive impact on society. What's interesting is when you heal someone, you save tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to society. Because society today needs to handle them, put them in shelters, give them help, etc. And this is all handled by AI. You just talk with an AI instead of talking to a professional. There's not enough capacity for getting in a room with an actual professional. AI is taking that role. So that's, again, AI making our life better, I guess. That's another way to do it. I like those companies on a mission who can also build a profitable business. So they're doing good and doing good. So that's my pick for consumer.
Yeah, they're a super, super cool company. It seems like they have loads of early traction. And Kobe Conrad was from Rupa Health, which exploded in the health space. And they Rupa was working on the practitioner side, so working with the I guess the B2B component of healthcare. So I think that's interesting for him to have that experience. Rupa exited last year, I think, to then come in and do something that's on the consumer side. He probably has tons of learnings there. And I think he was the head of growth and Rupa basically exploded. So
Yeah.
you can kind of see how he's brought that over.
He's the one responsible. I think he made Rupa grow from 5 million to 80 million in sales or something in 2 years. So so that's the playbook that he's bringing here, obviously in a different sector. But yeah, Kobe's the real deal for sure. So he's my pick for this category of consumer. Let's move on to fintech, our next category. What's your pick?
So my pick here is Selfin. You could also say this is kind of consumer. There weren't loads of fintechs in YC batch, and some of them were incredibly heavy, like on the B2B side with compliance. But Selfin is basically the consumer facing of fintech. So it's your neobank really. And it's like an all-in-one platform with AI. So you connect all of your accounts, your credit cards, checking accounts, investment, crypto, Roth IRAs, 401k, whatever. And then they can automate tasks or provide like a AI assistant for you to communicate with that and then figure things out. And I think like, again, I've been thinking about this from the lens of like, what would I want to be using? Like I've tried a bunch of those kind of apps. Like there's a big app in the UK called Emma, which is all about kind of like tracking your money across various places. But it doesn't do the other side of that, which is around like the savings and the crypto. And I'm sure like you, like me, or most people kind of our age, they have hundreds of accounts everywhere. You have investments accounts from Robinhood, you have one on Vanguard, you have like all over. And I think the centralization of that as a product is good. And then the next step of that, again, is this kind of AI native thing as well, where they can look at that and say like, oh, well, you're spending too much here on these kind of subscriptions, so we can help you save in that way. But then go even further than that again and go, well, actually, that money that you're saving, instead of your direct debit going into, say, your Vanguard, there's an equivalent product over here that is, less management fees or whatever that you should be using. So obviously the bull case here is just absolutely enormous because the market is everybody with a bank account. I think when I was looking at this, it's something like 58% of consumers have more than 3 finance apps on their phone. And so how can you basically just condense that? It is definitely interesting. And then I think that's all this kind of B2B side, but then the B2C side, but the B2B side is also really obvious. Like with this kind of AI differentiations, recommendations, as soon as you're dealing with someone's money management and then suggesting better decisions for them, you're 1 or 2 referral codes away from I guess hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue if you can get the consumer users into the application.
Yeah, it is a very interesting play. Fintech has always been very hot and did really well in YC. Stripe and Coinbase are both from YC, and it's been less hot in the last few years. And I think the reason is it became a lot commoditized. Everyone just was building a neobank, and I believed in consumer fintech in neobanks. It was some people in the space that did really well told me, because it's commoditized, it's all about customer acquisition cost. So how can you acquire a customer on the cheap? And so there's really 2 ways to win here. Either you're one of the biggest ones because you can just outspend everyone else. That's Chime, and we were investors in Chime, not with Lobster Capital, but anyway, and they just exited and IPO'd in June, and it's a great outcome. It's a great outcome for Chime. Or so you're a generalist, you're the biggest one, or you specialize. So we've seen in YC banking for couples, banking for immigrants who send money back home, stuff like that. And so your customer acquisition cost is very low because you're like, oh, I'm a couple, I want this, or I'm an immigrant, I want this. So you self-select. But apart from that, it's very difficult. Now, this is very interesting, I believe, because then it's again the AI native rebuilding of everything. And so that's the AI native bank. And many people probably would say, hey, I want this smarter bank than my dumb legacy bank, even if it's Chime. I don't want to call Chime dumb, but it's not AI native, which potentially gives them free customer acquisition. Because again, people self-select to be like, hey, I'm a techie, I understand AI, I want better insights. I'm just going to self-select and go there. So that's, I believe, what they need to prove. I think it's very possible. Like if the tool is really good, the recommendations and stuff, then customer acquisition will be very low and they can get to millions and millions of customers, and that's how you build a giant fintech.
And I know we shout out Kobe on the last one as the founder. The founder of Selfin, Paula, is a rocket scientist and used to work at NASA. So that's a pretty cool way to then go into a fintech product.
Pretty
So shout
insane.
out to
That's
Paula.
awesome. Shout out to Paula. Awesome. Brilliant. And my pick in fintech is actually, again, an AI native business rebuilding from the ground up. It is Fernstone. And Fernstone is an AI powered insurance brokerage for businesses. So the reason I was very interested in Fernstone is twofold. One, it's a copycat, or it's the same idea of another YC company that is a Lobster Capital portfolio company that we invested in around a year ago called Harper, which is doing the same thing. So AI native insurance brokerage. Harper is doing extremely well since the batch. It is also the business that made Warren Buffett rich. Few people know that, but Berkshire Hathaway was an insurance brokerage for difficult products to underwrite. And that's what he started making money with even before investing. And so that is obviously a massive business, a very interesting business, and it's ripe for disruption with AI because it's always the same thing. It's a lot of data points that you have to handle. It's a lot of communications, emails, forms to fill, et cetera, and rebuilding it from the ground up with AI makes a lot of sense. So Fernstone is just getting started, but again, I've seen this exact playbook before, and YC invests in competitors. We've talked about it here before. That's not a problem for them. It's probably a big enough market to have several winners. I think it's a very smart play. I want to see more of those legacy businesses ripe for disruptions by AI, where really there's a lot of documentations and email and stuff like that to have AI native competitors enter the market. Again, insurance is a huge market, obviously. That's just one sub angle, insurance brokerages, but there's a lot of things to do there. So because I've seen this play out well in the past, I believe they're very likely to do extremely well also. And so that's why I wanted to pick them here. And it's really an expression of what YC is looking to invest into. I think this is really almost best in class YC types of startups because they have such runway in front of them to just disrupt so many legacy businesses and playbooks. So super interesting to me. All right, our next category is healthcare. YC has been investing more and more in healthcare as well, and also a big sector, I guess, to disrupt with AI. So, Laurie, what's your pick for healthcare?
Yeah, so healthcare is probably the category in startups investing in general that I totally know the least about. So a huge pinch of salt with this one. The one that I just went straight in with is like, what is the highest upside if it succeeds? And so I've gone for Exonic. And so Exonic is an AI-driven drug discovery platform. So basically what that means is it crowdsources pharmaceutical research. It's like a kind of collaborative studio between bioengineers, biohackers that could be, civilians or scientists trying to basically open source biological modeling. And I guess the goal of that is to turn kind of what is drug discovery into this like meritocratic competition instead of something exclusive to, big pharma to then go and mark up like crazy. And so yeah, I didn't know a huge amount, especially being from the UK where healthcare is mostly centralized. Didn't know a huge amount about kind of the drug discovery process, but it seems like the market here is just exponentially big, and there has been a decent amount of heat in recent years, especially with Mark Cuban's startup to kind of attack the pricing and the systems there. And I think if they can go at the level of drug discovery, then they're in with a pretty good shot.
Yeah, Exonic is really cool. It reminded me of this company that is, I don't know, almost 20 years old now, called Fold It, which was a website where anyone could come and fold protein. They, folding protein before AlphaFold. Now AlphaFold sort of solved everything. AlphaFold from Google, but before that, folding protein was very difficult, and they just open sourced it and put it on the website, and anyone could come and play as a game. And it turns out there's some genius kids. And for them, it was sort of almost intuitive. They could sort of see the protein in their head and how it would fold and unfold, and they would just solve it. So there's, I believe, a 12-year-old that solved something on Folded that was not solved by top physicians. It's crazy. So it's the same idea here with Exonic. And so Ben, the founder, so we're doing shout out to founders, shout out to Ben, used to work before at Numerai, which is an open source crowdsourced hedge fund. Very interesting model. I didn't know it existed. Apparently, it's working quite well because that's what we see with Polymarket. It's like the wisdom of the crowd. It turns out the crowd is apparently pretty good predictor of a lot of those things. And so, doing it for drug discovery, I think in his launch video, he said, "Who do you think wins? Is it just like a few companies doing it themselves, or the entire internet? Who wins drug discovery?" And I looked at it. I was like, "Yeah, he's right. Internet is probably going to win." And I think he also wants to operate a wet lab, his own, to actually test the best ideas. So yeah, I agree with you. Exonic is probably one of the biggest potential outcome if he pulls it out. Like there's a lot of ifs, like in every startup, but probably one of the biggest potential outcome in the entire batch. Very, very, very interesting. I will soon in my next category present another potentially insanely huge outcome. So that's for the watch time. Stay tuned in my next category. But really, really cool on Exonic. My pick on healthcare is, I guess, not as big in potential, but still pretty interesting in my opinion. It's LunaBill. And so what LunaBill is doing is AI voice for insurance and for healthcare billing teams. Basically, the healthcare system in the US is happening a lot over the phone, and there's a lot of claims that are denied by insurers on the first submission that you need to check what's wrong and submit it again, and maybe you did something wrong. And of course, insurance are using AI more and more to reject you faster, and in some cases they require a phone call for you to appeal that process. And they do that on purpose because they know the hospitals and everyone else are usually understaffed, don't have enough resources to do those calls. So what LunaBill did, and those phone calls for a single claim on average take 30 minutes. That's why they're understaffed. Like if there's an 8-hour workday, you can probably process 16 phone calls and that's it. LunaBill is an AI that can process hundreds or thousands of calls at the same time and just get that sorted. What's really interesting is they have a proprietary data set and they have below 0.1% detection rate. So if the insurance detects it's an AI, they hang up because they want to make the process harder for you. But they have below 0.1% detection rate. And so they're already live. They've signed some really, really big names like UCSF and I forget the other one, but they signed big names and it's working. They've processed millions and millions of dollars of actual claim that they solved. So, you know, I thought this is very, very needed. It's again, going back to my thing of AI talking to AI. It's very possible that the insurers themselves use AI voice as well to answer those phone calls in the future. So it's AI talking to AI. It just makes society more efficient. It's probably not a great job anyway to be doing those claim appeals on the phone all day. So very interesting and well on their way, like already solving that problem for a lot of companies. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and again, the founder comes from pretty cool background too. He was working with that trying to remember off the top of my head, like an AI scribe company basically before. And so
three co-founders, three of them all built separate businesses before, and the three of those three businesses were pretty big. And yes, he built the leading medical scribe in Taiwan. That has 120,000 users, and it's a very, very cool team. The other two founders, I think, built in that space before. So, you know, a really impressive company for sure. And let's see, you know, where they go with that. All right. Now to our last category for today, industrials and real estate. Those two companies, those two categories were relatively small, so we grouped them. So what's your pick in either industrial or real estate, Laurie?
yeah, I've gone for industrial and I've gone for axial composites industries. While there's a lot of excitement at the moment about, you know, drones, space tech, autonomous vehicles, there is a lot less conversation about the actual material that goes into that. And so axial composites is basically next gen manufacturing for carbon fiber. So I guess maybe a very simplistic way of describing it is kind of like a 3D printing cell that can produce what is effectively high performance composites. So this is like incredibly durable, lightweight materials. And they are trying to just basically increase the speed of companies' ability to iterate with those materials. So more designs, more on-demand production, and that kind of thing. And so obviously there's the bull case here is that as the boom era for aerospace, autonomous systems, and that kind of things increases, there's just so much carbon fiber to hit kind of the very, very explicit, strength testing or weight testing for these products. The speed of iteration cycle in there is going to be hugely important. And then the knock-on effect with that as well is all tied into the things that we talked about before with the geopolitical angle. How can the US internally secure kind of advanced manufacturing capabilities? That as like an issue is increasingly important. And so I think market tailwinds there definitely can support them doing a lot of volume and appeal to this kind of local production advanced materials thing as well. So yeah, and it's like a full stack approach again. So it's like the hardware, i.e. the machine that is going to be making that product, the software to do that iteratively and efficiently, and then the material as well. So I think if they can get that to working at scale, they have this kind of end-to-end moat, which would take kind of anyone trying to compete in that space obviously years and years to replicate. And so it's pretty cool, and I think will quite clearly tie into what you're going to talk about too.
Yeah, this is an amazing pick. Love it, and thank you for bringing it up. So many people, outsiders, say that YC is just AI. A bunch of kids out of school building AI startups, and it is true there is some AI, but we've noticed, you and I, and people who follow YC closely, more and more and more of those companies on the hardware side in general, but more specifically on the materials. Just like you said, any rocket, any satellite, any drone needs some physical components, like not only the computing, but also like some metal or plastic or carbon fiber, whatever it is. And so there's been a few metal companies in YC. I've posted about some of them on LinkedIn. There's been, I think, a welding shop in YC recently. And now this with carbon fiber, like YC has been doing more and more of those. So again, to anyone saying, YC is only AI, YC has such a broad diversity of things. It is super interesting. And what's interesting as well is maybe there's less of them, but you don't need 25 carbon fiber companies in the US. You maybe just need one, but it needs to be the best. And they can hopefully supply the entire country and the entire effort. So this is amazing to see YC do this. And they're also doing AI at the same time. So, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a great, great, great example of what YC is also on top of being AI. And yeah, very much needed. Very few people doing it. Clear road for them to millions and millions in revenues, or maybe billions, hopefully for them. So pretty cool. And my pick for industrial, I also went with industrial, and it is Zephyr Fusion. And so Zephyr Fusion is also kind of a moonshot, big potential outcome. They're trying to do fusion in space. So fusion for energy creation, obviously, has been sort of the holy grail of energy for the past almost 100 years. And actually, we're getting close. So that's the good news. There's the biggest reactor being built in France right now, and it's an international collaboration with the US involved, in Japan and Europe, etc. And according to the founder of Zephyr that I talked to, he said to me, like, it should very likely ignite. Like, they think they have it down. It should very probably, if they're able to build it correctly, it should realistically ignite. So we are really getting closer. What's interesting with doing it in space is two things. One, plasma you need to build a plasma ring to create the fusion and to have the energy. It's created in a vacuum. And so on Earth, there is no vacuum. The first step is to recreate a vacuum where there's no air and nothing. And that's already pretty difficult. Of course, if you do it in space, the vacuum is already there. So that's the first thing. And so that means that their idea is not to have a plasma contained into anything, but to just have the plasma float in space. And their device is just something that comes into the center. It's called a dipole. And so the plasma just is there in space. So that's really, really cool. You don't need to create the vacuum. The other thing is, by definition, it's constrained by nature. Plasma needs to be quite big, or the ring needs to be big for some physical reasons of temperature difference, whatever it is. But for that reason, what they're building in France right now, the ITER thing, the new fusion reactor, is more than 100 meters long. Like, it's huge. And so you need to create the vacuum on that scale. So everything is extremely, extremely complicated. But again, in space, you have all the room you want. You don't care that it's big, and you don't need to create a big vacuum around it. So, it's extremely, extremely early. The team, incredibly talented, 2 fusion reactor PhDs. I think they, both of them, like in total, have more than 30 scientific publications on fusion. So it is probably the best team to do it. They're very early, and there's 10,000 technical questions, but it is interesting. YC recently released a big video on StarCloud and Philip Johnston, which actually was a guest on that podcast, on that very show, so you can go back to the show. And StarCloud is building data centers in space. And a lot of people, actually, StarCloud could use the energy from Zephyr Fusion to power their data centers. Right now, it's solar powered, but if there's a better power source out there, it's possible. And everyone sort of ridiculed them and said, why would you build data centers in space? It's so stupid. The heat dissipation doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out it's actually a very feasible thing. And StarCloud were the very, very first ones, but now everyone else is exploring that. Musk said he wants to explore that, and that SpaceX would do that at some point. Google is exploring it. I don't know if Blue Origin is not exploring it as well. Anyway, everyone now is thinking of doing that, when at the beginning it sounded crazy. So Zephyr doesn't even sound crazy to begin with, but they're the first one to do that. And yeah, it's very early. Let's see. But they're hoping to maybe have a prototype in space by 2029, I believe, which is not that long. Like, it's, 3.5 years away. So, we're so energy starved, basically, as a planet, and as in the US specifically, that, I just hope they can make it happen. Really cool. Let's see where they go with that.
Yeah, cool. I can't claim to know too much about fusion or thermodynamics in space, but I'll have to trust the YC filtering process that they know what they're talking about to select that. And then, yeah, just interested on that exact point. Like, how do you, I guess, when you're speaking to them or pitching them, like, what do you do when you go away, like, from that 30 minutes? Like, how do you,
Well,
is it just a trust me, bro?
no, I mean, there's a lot of things here. I mean, you're right. So, first of all, yeah, they've been selected by YC, so they have their own selection process. It's very demanding. Less than 1% of applicants are accepted. They are the experts. Like, they literally, those 2 founders are not 20-year-olds, and they spent decades, both of them, in the fusion space. Like, again, they both have PhDs, and they both have 30 plus, or in total 30 plus scientific publications on it. So if they tell you it's possible, then it's possible. Of course, you have to, sort of push and try to poke holes, because they tell you everything that's possible, and then they don't tell you the part that they haven't figured it out at all. So, for example, I spoke with the founder, and I asked him, like, okay, what do you do with the energy once it's there? Because it's in space, and like, how do you? And he was like, oh, we can do energy beaming, and like, sure, you can, but energy beaming, we don't really like. It doesn't really work well, and there's a lot of deperdition. Like, you don't, today you can beam, I believe it's 5% of the energy, and you lose 95%, depending on the distance. But if it's beaming it down to Earth, you're going to lose a lot of the energy. And then he said, oh, no problem. We can have another company come and attach to us and like consume the energy locally. So you think of a StarCloud data center in space who could just come and be attached to the fusion reactor in space and get the energy there. That's another set of problems, because it means you need to attach 2 satellites in space, which is what's been done for the ISS. But there's only 2 examples of successful meetings in space, which is done by NASA, and only in 2025 by China. And they only succeeded in maybe 24, but I believe it's 25. So like, it's technically absolutely feasible, and it might become something very easy in 10 years, like a module that you just buy and that some companies specialize on, maybe. But like, today, it's not, like, no one really knows how to do that except for NASA and China. So, and this, of course, he doesn't volunteer that information. You have to get it out of him. That being said, I'm not a fusion specialist. Like, I don't work in fusion day in and day out, but I always keep tabs on those things and many others quantum computing, and we talked about drug discovery and all those things. That's just curiosity on my part. But yeah, you need to have sort of at least a little bit of a background in there. So most of the things that I told you about, the vacuum and the size and how the fusion works and etc., like those are things I already knew. So when I talk to him, I understand, like, oh yeah, I know you need a vacuum and it's difficult and expensive, especially if it's big. In space, it's obviously there. Like, you get that instantly. I asked him as well, like he again didn't volunteer the information. It's like, how do you ignite the plasma? You need a lot of energy to just ignite it. And so you need to get that energy up in space. And so again, like he doesn't have a solution there. So because I know igniting plasma takes a lot of energy, because I've been just keeping tabs on it. So I don't know, I'm a scientist originally, like I have a engineering degree, and I'm curious and I keep tabs with those things. Not everything, like if you ask me how you grow mushrooms, like I don't know. But if you ask me on fusion, like yes, I have some notions there. And then you can always call experts, and you can also use AI. Now AI is so good, ChatGPT 5 is equivalent to a PhD, I think. So you can also bring everything, put it into ChatGPT and be like, what's your scientific opinion, or what are the holes? Like I haven't done it for this startup specifically, but I remember doing it for another YC startup and be like, what's the science behind it? What are the limits? What does the science tell us today about those possibilities? And you can, just ask experts in your network as well if you have a doubt.
Yeah, cool. I think we covered some good ones. It'll be interesting to see how they demo on demo day, like what specifically they talk about for their kind of traction, their LOIs, that sort of stuff. Because that's the other thing that's interesting about these kind of really moonshot ones, is like, what are they through the process of YC across those 3 months? Like, what are they pushing on to show for traction? Because obviously it's going to take a lot longer than 3 months to create that as a product, to stress test that as a product. So what are they doing today to show some kind of metric or revenue or seed of that at least?
Yeah, I should touch on that because a lot of people have been wondering about that as well. YC is really pushing you to accelerate whatever you're building. It's obviously much easier in software where you can just build and ship and reach people internationally. When you're doing fusion in space, it is much harder, obviously. But YC really tries to push you and say, what's the minimum viable thing that you can build in 3 months that you can prove? So in the case of Zephyr, I don't know if they've built specifically something in the lab, but they got a bunch of LOIs from people. And LOIs are just LOIs, obviously, but people who say, yeah, we'd use it potentially, including StarCloud. In the case of other hardware deep techs, I've seen their 3 months in YC be very useful, and I've seen them actually build something. So we can talk about Perseus Defense that Lobster Capital invested in the previous batch, and they built a functioning prototype and actually built several and iterated, and the prototypes were very, very well advanced in just 3 months. They've just been going so quickly. There's a lot of other examples, but yeah, so YC pushes you, even if you're a hardware company, just what's the smallest thing? I can talk about another company in this batch called Wardstone, who's trying to build missile defense from satellites. So they want to build a Golden Dome for the US. It's a missile built that's going on a satellite, and then if there's a supersonic missile coming from Russia or China, they can intercept it from space. Like, same thing, they haven't built the actual missile and the satellite, but they went into the desert and they built like a small prototype mounted on a cannon that can intercept a missile, just to show like, okay, this is how it works. We detect the path of the missile, which is already that software, but you can build it right away. And then we shoot it and blah, blah, blah. So like, again, they went with the minimum viable product or prototype and built that. And that's what YC really pushes you. So I got a message today on LinkedIn, like, hey, we have a hardware product. I'm not sure if we should do YC. What do you think? And I was like, yeah, you should do YC. And whatever that is for your hardware or deep tech, but there's always things that you can do. And YC will help you think about that and get it done.
Yeah, including the drones that shoot down mosquitoes. I'm excited to see how they
Oh
do
my God.
demo
How
days, yeah.
did we not talk about them? They're so cool. Tornial, drones shooting like, so yeah, Tornial, small drones that just kill mosquitoes by hitting them with their, how do you call them? Wings or helix or pads or whatever, right? And just crushes them. So cool. I'm so excited to see them. Yeah. So, there's many, many more. Subscribe to the channel. That's it for today. And we'll be back just after demo day. So a few days after December 3 or the next Tuesday, because we publish every Tuesday, doing a debrief of the batch of the demo day. Laurie, thank you so much. That was awesome. And to our listeners, thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.